Senator's indicated he'd be glad to enter into a discussion with you if any of you happen to have a question or two. Senator?
Yes.
The racist character of American life and how that influences our views towards China. Would you care to comment?
I wasn't aware that was a very important or major factor, to tell you the truth.
From everything you said, Senator,
I can't see anybody, so that's a rather disadvantage.
from everything you've said, it seems to me that the first step towards a more rational China policy would be to admit China to the U.S. and also to recognize her, and would you advocate admitting China to the U.S. and recognizing
Well, I've said before that I would be in favor of admitting Communist China into the United Nations. I would also like to retain our relationship with nationalist China. And I think that we have a commitment there. I think that when I say that, I recognize that it's really rather inconsistent, because I think that as far as a practical matter, I think that the possibility of developing a two-China policy is rather remote. I don't think it's going to be acceptable to the nationalist Chinese and the communist Chinese. But I would hope that, I think that at least there is a possibility that out of the convulsions that are presently taking place within communist China, I think that there's a possibility that out of those convulsions, plus the changes that are going to inexorably take place on Formosa, that possibly in the future those two countries would come closer together. That is my suspicion, and I would think that the role of the United States then in relationship with Formosa is going to be quite different than it is at the present time. I wouldn't be prepared to abandon, as I said, I have grave reservations about the democratic system of Formosa, but we've had a commitment to Formosa and nationalist China that's gone on for a long period of time, and I would not be prepared to abandon that commitment in connection with the United Nations. So I think that that's the problem. As I say, I'd be glad to recognize or bring Communist China into the United Nations. I just don't think there's a practical possibility that they will accept it. So as far as the recognition of Communist China, I think that at the present time, it doesn't make a great deal of sense. I've said before that I'd be prepared to take that step if the situation developed within China, that there was a government in which we could deal, in which it made some sense. I'm not opposed to recognizing Communist China at the appropriate time. I don't think today it happens to be it.
Senator Kennedy, you see developing in Thailand an American commitment similar to the one we have in South Vietnam, and do you approve of our development policy in Thailand?
I would think that that there is a commitment similar to the one that we developed in Vietnam, similar to the one that we have in Vietnam, developing in Thailand. I would think that particularly in dealing with the problems of northeast Thailand, that is developing, and the fact that we have, I believe, approximately 35,000 men in Thailand at the present time. I would think that we were moving in that direction. I have very grave reservations about it. I wouldn't think we're certainly not at the same stage that we are in Vietnam at the present time. I would think that probably we're back like we were 5 or 6 years ago. But I would think that we're certainly moving in that direction. And I have grave reservations that we should move in that direction. I think that we've known about the problems of northeast Thailand. We've known about the difficulty that exists in northeast Thailand, and the fact that northeast Thailand has had in the past very little relationship with the capital city, and that there is a good deal of opposition in that part of the country to the central government. There has been ample opportunity for the central government to put in reforms. I think that there are some changes that are taking place that are for the better, but I question whether they are rapid enough. But in any case, I think that's a problem that should be handled by the people of Thailand and not by the soldiers of the United States. Can I go over here? Go ahead.
Since, as you say, you brought back no Hanoi peace.
I wish I hadn't.
You bring back instead a feeling about how Hanoi would react to stopping his bombing.
I have some feelings about it. I think they'd be pleased.
Senator, the present administration has repeatedly argued in partial justification of its policy in Vietnam that this policy is no more than a continuation of that of previous administrations. Do you consider this argument valid?
Well, I would say that if you're going to, if you're going back to previous administrations for a responsibility of why we're in the situation that we are, or why we're in Vietnam, certainly previous administrations, including the administration which I played a role, President Kennedy's administration, have to take their responsibility. Now, I don't know that wouldn't be able to say that President Eisenhower would have followed the same course that President Kennedy followed, nor would we be able to say that President Kennedy would or would not have followed the same policy that's been followed over the period of the last 3 years. I think that's conjecture, but if you're, and I think anybody who tries to determine, as some have, as to what a previous president would or would not do is making a bad mistake. But I think that if anybody was going to say that if they find fault with the present situation in Vietnam and say that this is just the responsibility of President Johnson, I think it would be very, very unfair. He inherited a situation which was very difficult and very complex, and where the problems were immense, and he's, in my judgment, tried to deal with it with courage and with determination. And I think he makes an effort to... I think he wants to find a peaceful solution to the problems of Vietnam. I happen to have some disagreements in connection with some of those matters, but I recognize the fact that he's making a conscientious effort and has a great deal of knowledge and is dedicated to trying to find an answer to that problem.
Senator, you talked about the other great nations of Asia. What do you feel the United States can do to encourage them to deal with their own domestic problems and to take upon themselves more responsibility in facing up to the challenge of communist China?
Well, obviously what is going to be required, I suppose the most important one really is India. And there are obviously internal changes and improvements that have to be made by the Indian government itself. We've had numerous conversations and discussions with them. I don't think that you really can hold them up to blackmail and say that we're not going to assist you unless you follow the course, just the course that is wished and wanted by the United States. But on the other hand, I think that we can point out that unless certain reforms are undertaken, then it's not going to make a great deal of difference how much aid or assistance the United States gives. I think our aid or assistance has to be of sufficient magnitude so that they really can get their head above water. And when we give, as we are now, $600 million of economic aid to Vietnam and just a small portion of that to India, which has a population of 400 million, and with the population increasing as it is, they have a very difficult time even getting started. So I think that we have to do more from an economic point of view so that they at least can see their course a little bit more clearly than they do at the present time. I think that we also have to take whatever steps we can to make sure that the countries of Western Europe meet their responsibility, and Japan, the developed countries of the world, help the undeveloped countries of the world. I don't think any of us have done enough. I think here in the United States, where our assistance to the undeveloped world, based on our gross national product and based on our population, has been going steadily down over the period of the last 10 years, I think is a bad mistake and very short-sighted, as I tried to point out in my prepared statement. I think, however, the other countries of Western Europe, which have prospered so tremendously, at least partially because of the aid and assistance that we have given to them, initially should also help to meet the demands that are required in the undeveloped part of the world. I think that, let me say that President Kennedy once said that if we don't help the many who are poor, there won't be anything left of the few that are rich. And I think that that's absolutely true. I think that we can go along, we can make all the kind of progress that we want in the United States and in Western Europe. But as the gap between the poor nations and the rich nations grows larger and larger, there's going to be greater and greater bitterness and disillusion meant throughout the world. And I think that's going to be an unsatisfactory world to hand on to the next generation of Americans. So it seems to me that we're prepared to take military action, and we're prepared to spend $2.5 billion a month to dispose of people in Vietnam, and something like $400,000 for every person that we kill. I think that we should also be prepared to help other countries when we're as affluent as we are. We can spend $3 billion a year in the United States on dogs, then I think that we can spend a portion of that on foreign aid. Do you know we spend $600 million just on licensing dogs each year in the United States? We spend $100 million on comic books. I thought it was a large proportion which come... people who read comic books. Could we put that light a little lower?
Expanding to South Vietnam, the independent regime, and the wins on the independent China?
Well, first, I think it's Hanoi as a relationship with China, but I think that the history of the Vietnamese and history of North Vietnamese as a people is very antagonistic toward China. It's always been traditionally a bitter enemy of China. I think the fact that it has a communist government and China has a communist government and that they are neighbors, that they have been thrown together to some extent. I don't think that they are completely independent of China by any means, but I don't believe that the North Vietnamese want the control or domination of the Chinese in their country or would permit it in South Vietnam if they took over South Vietnam.
Good.
Senator, would you comment on the efficacy of the Lower Mekong Basin project to stabilize or influence the need for reconciliation and economic development in Southeast Asia?
Well, I think that makes a good deal of sense. The person who, of course, was the strongest supporter of it always and I think pushed it more and reserves most credit for evolving the idea within at least the United States government was Chester Bowles. I think he used to talk about it continuously as a project that he thought was well worthwhile. I think that it is. It makes a good deal of sense as I think the Asian Development Bank has a good deal of promise in trying to deal with some of those problems. Again, I think that... Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes.
What did he say?
Within Vietnam is going to go on for some considerable period of time if we rely purely on military means. I think that the talent and energy and effort that we've made has been more obvious in the military field than it has been in the political economic field, which I think has suffered thereby. I'm in favor of and I believe the administration also is in favor of a civilian government within Vietnam. I would like to see a civilian government. I'd like to see support for the constitutional, assembly that has been elected. I would hope that that they would be able to take over, and the civilian would be able to take over who responds to the will of the people of South Vietnam. I would also, as I have said before, again, I would be in favor of the National Liberation Front being represented directly at any peace talks that we might have in connection with trying to find a peaceful solution to the problem of Vietnam. Those are some of the areas in which there's some shades of differences.
Senator, I wonder if you're willing to try another room. We have
all right, well, maybe I'll take a couple, two more, and then I'll go. Yes.
Could you describe
describe in your own words exactly what a peace signal is, as opposed to a peace feeler? And also comment on the validity of Newsweek's article as referring to you as having brought back a peace signal in your recent trip to there.
I have to go to the other room. Well, I don't know. I don't know what the difference between a peace feel and a peace signal is, to tell you the truth.
Senator, if you don't mind an interruption.
I never